Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Julie Defoe, a member of the Go West team. Thank you so much for joining us for international tourism in an aviation challenge environment. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes to review. This presentation will be recorded and posted to the Go West Summit website on the Education Week page. You've been muted by the host, but we encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A box. All questions will be taken at the end of this session. Finally, I will introduce Mary Motzenbacher, President of Go West Summit, who has the honor of introducing our panelists for this session.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. We have the great honor and pleasure this afternoon of having Alfredo Gonzalez and Fernando Harb with us. Spanning over the last 30 years, Fernando and Alfredo have had similar paths in the travel industry. Fernando starting his career in the New York hotel scene and Alfredo in Central Florida. As the industry changed, so did their paths. Trade show administration, tour operators, and eventually working together for the Greater Fort Lauderdale Convention and Visitors Bureau. Their careers gave them the opportunity to travel the world and meet fascinating people who were their first clients, but today they're great friends. Today, as they continue to work for the industry, they've chosen to work for themselves. Fernando is a principal in Spotlight Hospitality Solutions, and Alfredo is the founder of AG Hospitality Group, serving as consultants and advisors to a number of travel industry partners like Discover Long Island, Destination Niagara USA, Frontier Airlines, and the Daytona Beach International Airport, just to name a few. They're passionate, as you know. They're passionate about the hospitality industry, and their willingness to serve has not been compromised by this current situation. That's their story, and they're definitely sticking to it. At this point, I'll turn it over to Alfredo and Fernando.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for the opportunity to present today at Go West. I wish we were in person. I was looking forward to spending some time in Colorado this year, but I know we can do that at another time. So thank you, Julie. Thank you, Mary. And I'd like to thank my co-presenter and co-best friend, Fernando Harb, for this. So we were tasked in putting together something that would be of interest to all of us, especially right now, international tourism in an aviation challenge world. With that, let me go ahead and pass it on to my partner, Fernando, and he'll start with the presentation.
Well, we'll go to the next slide then, or first slide. So first of all, thank you everybody for the opportunity. Also, it's my pleasure to join all of you, and thank you, Mary and Julie, for allowing us to be part of that. We're going to flip-flop a little bit, as Alfredo and I are known to do in our presentations. So I'm going to take, first of all, what's happened in the past, and let's look at some of the factors that affected aviation as it refers to tourism. Of course, we all know September 11th and the cause that had. The flights were grounded for some time. The pandemic of SARS in 2002, 2003 also slowed a lot of aviation down in tourism and in business. The global financial crisis had a major effect also on the amount of flights that were available, the cutbacks, and of course the Icelandic ash cloud of 2010. Now, these four items all caused a problem in aviation, but in all cases, it was recoverable. It was a matter of time, a short time to say, okay, you know, September 11th was a horrible thing, but we knew that eventually we'd get back in the air with more stringent security measures, but we'd be back in the air. SARS at that time was a little bit more controlled. It wasn't a global pandemic, and it was the same thing. Flights got restricted, they got brought out. The financial crisis, well, that really just affected some people in the amount and their ability to travel and the expenses they had, or cutbacks. The business class traveler may suddenly become a coach traveler. And the Icelandic ash cloud is the easiest. It was basically fly around it until eventually you can go back to flying the direct routes. Yep. All of these cases, as I said, allowed the airlines to, or I should say, caused the airlines to suffer a bit, but knew that they'd come back better, stronger than ever, and that's exactly where we went on to. Next slide, please.
So where are we now? And now is important in all levels. What COVID-19 has done, we've never seen before. The way it had hit the airline industry has never been seen. Hopefully we'll never see again. We're looking at, when we first started researching, I did not even know there was 38 airlines in the US. Well, there are, and some of them will never come back. Some of them will restructure. And as we've seen, the big three, United American and Delta, they're fighting to see how they can stay afloat. And the low-fare carriers, they seem to be able to fit a niche that is actually helping people get around. So the airlines have had to do all kinds of creative things to stay alive. You guys have probably heard that the airlines are retiring aircraft. They're reducing capacity. And in the process, thousands of jobs are being lost. Now, something that will be very interesting and timely will be September 30th. The CARES Act will expire on that day. If Congress doesn't step in, and I did read something just today, the debate over the airline assistance has been stalled in Congress and has been struggling to figure out what kind of package they will come up with. Some lawmakers think Congress and the White House may not want to reach a deal until September. The U.S. Travel Association said that business travel and workers cannot wait until September or until the election. Congress must come together immediately to pass meaningful legislation. This legislation would allow for a second package that would extend hopefully through April of next year. Why April? Because if it extends through December 30th in a low season environment, the airlines will not be able to recoup. So hopefully Congress will listen to this, that we need assistance to extend the CARES Act all the way through April or May of 2021. That is going to be very important as we move forward and the survival of the airlines. Next slide, please. So we wanted to take the key markets and see how those markets behave and are behaving with the US. As of this presentation, a lot of information came out as of yesterday and today. So I'm going to give you like the bullet news items. So number one, the CDC has dropped the suggestion that all international travelers should self-quarantine upon return to the US. That's good news. Bad news, American Airlines will suspend service to 13 cities in the US starting October 1. Plans to lay off 19,000 employees unless Congress comes with some kind of package. Delta is looking to furlough 2,000 pilots by October. The good news internationally, Delta will reinstate about 50 international transatlantic and trans-Pacific flights starting summer of 2021. Emirates Airlines in the UAE has announced that they will operate 100% of their pre-COVID capacity by summer 2021. That's really good news. The other is hotels. And I just got this morning. It says US hotel occupancy for the week of August 9th to the 15th hit a 50.2% average. The first time that's hit over 50% since March of 2020. Occupancy is still down 30 points from where it was the same time last year when it topped 80%. Hotels rates have not dropped as much as occupancy, with the average rates only dropping about 20%. With airline demand around 30% of normal, it is clear that hotels are filling up with guests who are driving, not flying. With that said, let's see what's going on. That's in the latest news, so we'll leave that one for later. So, next slide, please. Canada, our #1 trading partner to the north. Back in March, they anticipated with what's going on in the US that the borders would be open by May 21st. That changed to June 21st, July 21st, August 21st. Now it looks like September 21st. Experts say that that is not likely. The number of cases and positive cases in the US has made the Canadian government think twice. So even though September 21 is an aggressive date, which would help us all tremendously, I and others think that the real number is probably more like October or November. The Canadian government is doing tons of things to try to cope with this. They put together the Canada Flight Plan for Navigating COVID, which is basically putting all kinds of implementing programs all around airports, what to do, how to do, air conditioning, air filtration, so forth. Air Canada, the largest carrier in Canada, has taken huge hits. Their operating losses are ridiculous, and they blame it all on our borders being closed. Our partnership or our relationship with Canada is so close that when something like this, like a border closing between the countries, whether it be tourism, commerce, or any other exchange, it makes it very difficult. So Canada is looking to see how and when they can help push these borders open. WestJet has announced, and this was as of when the August schedule, they would actually serve 48 destinations, not only in Canada, but the US, Caribbean, and Mexico. We hope that that is the case, that they keep those schedules, mostly now changed to September and October, because we really do need to get these planes back in the air. Hopefully, the Canadian government is coming up with some stimulus programs as well to help the airline industry. Next slide, please.
All right, so Brazil. This one is a little near and dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of time there. I was immersed in the culture, and so the information that's coming out of Brazil was painful, to say the least. First and foremost, unlike most other countries where the television carried scenes of people in hospitals, scenes of lines of people to get tested, Brazil had some very horrific television news coverage. Quite literally, bulldozers digging massive trenches to be able to cope with the number of deaths as a result of COVID. Needless to say, that image above anything else really scares the people. And with that, Brazil, who was finally, after a few years, struggling and the economy was starting to come back up, and there were, everybody was anticipating the rebirth of the Brazilian market. Well, needless to say, this has crashed it. Right now, according to the government estimates, it's going to be a zero economic growth throughout 2020, and most likely will continue to decline into 2021. Now, if you know anything about the Brazilian culture, the joke is that Brazilians would rather spend all their money on a trip to the US and a carnival outfit than they would on food or housing. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the expectation anymore. And obviously, it's a little exaggerated, but because they just don't have it. Even the A and B class traveler, who traditionally has always traveled regardless of the economic situation, they're seeing a downturn. They're staying home longer. They're afraid of what's going on in terms of leaving the country and what comes back, the quarantines that are imposed in Brazil. So it's really, unfortunately, spiraling down faster than it is on the road to recovery. Brazilian Airlines. Well, Brazilian Airlines are looking to hopefully restart in the fourth quarter in some limited capacity, but the fares will be much lower. And they go back to what I just mentioned, because economically the Brazilians can no longer travel the way they used to. Their big trip, their holiday shopping trip, their summer attraction trip, all the things that used to bring Brazilians into the US, now it's just they quite literally from a financial standpoint can't afford it. The Brazilian mentality of you buy a trip and you pay it in 12 installments on your credit card, a lot of that has been curtailed simply because the banks themselves cannot afford to extend the credit long term. So these are things that are affecting it. And the airlines, their only solution for them is to drop down the rates and hope that they'll get some business coming in. But at the same time, that lower rate on an airplane slows down the recovery of the airline. Interesting enough, you may have all heard Avianca Brazil has pretty much imploded. They're gone. LATAM Brazil is hanging on by its fingernails and hoping for a bailout. So David Neeleman, with many of you may know, was a creator of JetBlue and then subsequently Azul, that flies from Brazil, a lot of domestic in Brazil, but as well as to the US. He's looking at possibilities now that Avianca is pretty much out of the picture, of trying to expand and increase the Azul product into the US. And speaking of which, Alfredo, I think you had some update as to what David is up to besides his Azul program.
Yes, well, David is definitely no stranger to starting airlines, and the success of JetBlue was all him, and then Azul, which was a JetBlue of Brazil. Well, David Neeleman is coming back to the U.S., and he will be coming back to the U.S. with an airline called Breeze. That's after several names that did not stick to the wall, but Breeze will look to come. Right now, they've delayed the announcements, but it'll be servicing first the East Coast of the U.S. He loves Fort Lauderdale, so there's probably a real good chance that when he starts service out of Florida, it'll be Fort Lauderdale, New York first, and then it'll expand. So that's interesting news of a very knowledgeable aviation professional, really looking at the opportunities that fall of Avianca Brazil and others and LATAM. So taking advantage of that. So we'll see hopefully good news on that side. Next slide, please. So Mexico, our southern partner, they are having their issues as well. But they've opened their border. So it's interesting because there's a lot of demand and a lot of people flying to Mexico right now. In the air service world, they do look at contraction. That means that there will be less players in the market, and there is going to be mergers and acquisitions. Those stronger airlines will assume the smaller airlines. It's changing so dramatically that the Mexican government is probably going to put a stop to the Mexico City airport outside of where it is today because of the cost, and really take that money to protect the integrity of the airlines. So Aeromexico did file for bankruptcy. But they are looking at restructuring. They will probably come out about 40% smaller than they used to be. Interjet, which was a big player in servicing Mexico to mostly the West Coast of the US, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and California, they were down to only operating 2 airplanes. Volaris, which is their low-fare carrier, it seems to be taking advantage of the fact that people are looking on necessary trips, the cash position. So their tickets are very affordable. They put together some very unique cleaning procedures in these airplanes, from blue light, ultraviolet to HEPA filters and so forth. So they're not hurting as bad as the others. And the travel companies in Mexico have actually adopted a very European way to work, which is the waiving deposit, non-refundable deposits and bookings wherever possible. They're looking to work with customers and see how they can change their plans. It's not necessarily, look, we're canceling. No, they're looking to see how they can rebook. The tour operators that I've spoken to are all willing to listen to us, especially our receptive operators. How do we keep this client? Let's not cancel. Let's see where we can postpone. And that's actually working very well. When at first we thought that once they got into a Mexican environment, the money was gone. That's not the case. That's a nice thing to hear from our partners in the travel industry in Mexico. Next slide, please, Julie.
Okay, Germany. So Germany, believe it or not, has actually fared a little bit better than most of the European Union countries. They did create a safe travel list that includes 145 countries. The bad news, Russia, the United States, and Brazil are not one of them. They are still insisting on closed borders. They're not allowing any traffic to come in, and that's going to slow down the tourism effort, simply because there's no travel to the U.S. in this case. A lot of planes have been retiring or even mothballing. A lot of airlines have been retiring or mothballing a lot of their airplanes, getting rid of them, downsizing. Lufthansa is in the middle of doing that. They have retired several planes, actually reduced by almost 40%, but they played it a little bit smarter. What they've done is they are parking several of their planes in Spain, believe it or not, where they will keep them at the ready so that on a moment's notice, these planes can be dusted off, pardon the pun, and just brought back into service. So they are poised for a faster than usual recovery should the opportunity to rise, and have those planes sitting ready, willing, and able in a deserted airport, as I understand it, or Alfredo, I think you knew where it was, somewhere in Spain. Their economy has fared better than most. Largely due to a very, very generous stimulus package that the government rolled out. Tour operators have managed to keep a lot of their employees on staff, but with that same thing, a lot of these big overhead costs, like the big offices, the glass and steel buildings, those have all gone away. And there's a resurgence, or almost a norm now, where all of these operators and travel agencies are starting to work from home and keeping that at least for the foreseeable future, the norm within their offices. It's no longer the big offices. TUI, while TUI is not in the same danger as I should say, is not in danger of suffering the same fate that Thomas Cook had, they have been one of the worst hit companies amid the coronavirus crisis. Just not too long ago, a report came out that their share price has declined 2/3 since the outbreak began. And with the flow of global tourism choked off by the travel restrictions imposed by the very governments. The second quarter results brought TUI's 9-month loss to over 2 billion euros. That's $2.37 billion. Which is, by the way, almost 1.8 billion over the same period last year. So they are hurting tremendously. They're still surviving. As I said, they got a very generous government bailout, but we still need to see how long can this last before the money runs out if tourism does not begin to flow the way it used to be. Next slide, please.
So our friends in the UK, as we heard early on the pandemic, they got hit really hard. At some point in time, they were worse than Spain and Italy combined on cases and deaths. And like we mentioned before, our borders, we're still not allowed in the UK. I know there's a big push for that to change. And I think that's almost a daily debate that's being held between our US travel friends in the UK and the government, and figure out when that will happen. The UK at first did not go out and give the same type bailout that we did in the US, but the airlines are actually looking for that. Richard Branson himself took money out of his own, let's call it his own pocket, to do a bailout of Virgin Atlantic. Now, even with that assistance, Virgin was still going to file for US bankruptcy protection because of their 49% partnership with Delta. As of, I believe, last week, the UK government approved it's a large amount of billion pounds that Virgin is going to get as a bailout to help them out. Now, BA, one of the things, and I don't know, this is going to be very interesting as all of us in the travel industry travel back and forth to the UK, going into Heathrow and not seeing a 747 parked in Terminal 4 or Terminal 3. BA will now ground their entire fleet of 747s. The Queen of the Skies will no longer have the flag, which is a sad. I love the 747s. And that's kind of a big change for all the carriers like BA, like Lufthansa, like Qantas, that were utilizing very big airplanes. Even Emirates made an announcement. They will start retiring the A380, the double-decker A380, because they just cannot see the sustainability of an airplane that can seat over 500 passengers. With BA removing the 747s, again, large capacity aircraft. So what is that going to leave a BA or a Lufthansa? Well, right now the orders are going in, and I know that BA is looking at the addition of really utilizing the one that's really taken the blunt. Most of the work now is a 777, a Boeing 777. And the Dreamliner, the 787, especially that right now when we're looking at the world competing to see who's got the longest flight. Now it's pre-COVID. Are we still going to be on the same race to see if we can get a 19-hour flight in? Maybe the race is not going to be that fast, but it will continue, I think, as things get back to normal. But we will see in the airline world is a whole change from these very, very large aircraft into smaller airplanes. We were seeing it domestically 2 years ago. We were looking at what was the need of having the CRJs and the Embraers, the 170s and 190s with maximum 50 passengers. Well, demand was so high that it was probably easier to ground a CRJ and get a mainline 737 or an Airbus, a 320, 321. So now, as we look at things coming back to normal, the operators in the UK and really in Germany and all over the world are going to be looking to see how they can get people over without the big equipment. So we'll see what happens. Airbus will probably bring in, really push the A350, which is a big plane. And I think we're going to see, especially out of the UK, the 777 will continue to be the workhorse. Next slide, please.
All right, so China. I know that's been on our mind a lot. Chinese carriers have transported more than 1 million passengers in one day for the first time since late January, as the country continues to recover from coronavirus crisis. The passenger traffic is about 61.5% of where it was in 2019. Now, prior to the coronavirus outbreak, which as we know started in Wuhan, the average daily number of flights was 17,300 with over 2 million passengers. When on February 13th, which is the lowest point when the pandemic hit hard and affected them, the number of passengers went from 2 million to 132,000, and the 17,300 flights dropped to 3,900. It's a massive decrease, a massive fall. It's over 92.5% in flight reduction and 77% of, I'm sorry, the other way around. 92% passenger reduction and 77% of the flights that were cut compared to the daily average. Now, since February, much earlier than what we're seeing here, the recovery has been slow but steady. After initial upsurge in capacity during March, the number of departure seats plateaued for about 7 weeks and stayed around the same before resuming growth back in April. Daily passenger average in March was 458,000, rising to 522,000 in April, and by May, 785,800. Almost 99% of the capacity was on the domestic routes, however. So the CAAC, the Chinese Aviation Authority, began to relax some of the border control restrictions and emulated what the European Union did by creating what they call green channels, which were for flights to the airports in the mainland. The countries that they allowed to fly into China at the time was France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Singapore, and South Korea, Switzerland, and the UK. Again, unfortunately, the US was not included in that. However, the Trump administration issued an order to suspend Chinese passenger airlines from flying to the US beginning June 16th. Since that announcement, Chinese announced that it would ease restrictions, and the Department of Transportation scrapped the plans to ban the flights from China. Basically, a new procedure was put in place. If a flight's passengers test negative for the virus for 3 consecutive weeks, the airline will be able to add 1 additional flight per week. So it's a slow but measurable way to add on more flights. As it is in the coming week, 108 international flights are planned to China. They'll be flown from 20 foreign airlines from 12 countries. Domestically, 18 airlines will start to fly to 88 international routes out of China. Now, to contain the imported cases of COVID-19, China is allowing each foreign airline to maintain only 1 route to China and operate only 1 flight per week on it. These flights are not permitted to have a load factors beyond 75%, so social distancing can be maintained within the aircraft. Beijing-bound international flights are still being diverted to other airports for passenger health screening before flying on to the country's capital. Tianjin Airport, and I apologize if I'm butchering the name, as well as Qingdao and Hohhot airports are receiving the passengers that are destined for Beijing. They will get in, they will be screened and tested, and if okay, they will continue the short hop into Beijing. Now, the US and China will allow each other's carriers to double current flights between the markets. The Department of Transportation has issued an order that allows the 4 Chinese airlines performing scheduled passenger service to the US to increase their services to 8 round trips per week. So we will start to see an increase in flights out of China into the US. United and Delta Airlines, which are right now the only 2 US airlines currently flying to China, have also been permitted by the CAAC to increase their respective frequency from 2 to 4 times per week. United said it would increase San Francisco to Shanghai 4 times a week using Boeing 777s. But the route will have to first land in Seoul, Korea. We will not have the direct nonstop. Delta is operating 1 time a weekly from Seattle and Detroit, also to Shanghai, both of which are also via Seoul, Korea. They are planning to double each route to 2 times a week. Now, prior to the outbreak of the virus, United operated more than 60 flights per week across 9 routes. Delta provided almost 40, flights across 6 routes. American Airlines, which we know had flights from Dallas, Los Angeles to Beijing, still remains suspended with no clear indication of when those flights will actually begin to resume. So to me, of the markets we've covered, China is the silver lining. There is an increase. It will start to come back. I think as we start building up these flights, and as I said, if every week we get a plane with no COVID infected passengers, we can double. Hopefully by the time 6 months, we'll be almost at the same capacity that we had before COVID-19. Next slide, please.
Now, it's very interesting about China because one of the things that in China, most of those airlines are Chinese owned. They did not need a bailout. They just parked. They parked the airplanes. They told the pilots to go home and wait till they get the green light to go back. So interesting that the virus originated in China, but China could be our fastest recovering international market into the US when the borders are open. So it takes us to the next stage of what should destinations do based on what's going on. No one really has that crystal ball that can see into the future, but I know that everyone is trying very hard in getting ready. We know that whether it be medically, scientifically, a treatment will be found and a vaccine will be found, and hopefully that will allow people the ability to travel freely. Now, we know, for example, that a lot of people are afraid to get in an airplane. But if you look at what airplanes and airports and airplanes are doing, the cabin of an airplane, the air is circulated every 2.5 seconds. That means that air that you're basically breathing, and in a minute, 2 seconds later, you got fresh air. The HEPA filters, the pre-boarding procedures, the cleaning procedures, the ultraviolet lights, they're making an airplane cabin cleaner than your grocery store. And I know it's going to take some convincing and it's going to take some trying. And I think the statistics will tell people when they see, how many people are flying and how many people could potentially get infected on a plane. And because of what the airplanes are doing with the food and the liquor and all these kind of interaction with crew, they're changing. And those changes will affect how we recover as destinations. Now, the airlines are trying to figure out, with demand and borders and everything, a game. It's a game. But for international recovery to happen, the destinations need to understand the dependency on air service. And let me talk about how, and this is my experience, Fernando and I have been working on this. The airlines are going to be looking for ways to minimize the risk to either stay in your destination or to go to your destination. 2 years ago, somebody would say, can you fly from, Daytona Beach to Seattle? And you go, well, no, not really. Well, even though that's just an example, right now, with the way that the airlines are putting themselves into looking for partnerships and really unique city pairings, that might not be as crazy as it sounds. I just use that as an example. There are a lot of unique city pairings in the country that were unserved or underserved. This is an opportunity. Why is it an opportunity? Well, as destinations, whether it be a DMO at the state level or CVB, county or state or city, we have always had money to support programs to have inbound to our destinations. You now, and most of you do, most of the people that I know that I've worked with in the past know that there's opportunities, and the airlines are looking for these partnerships. The key word is partnership. Well, what is the airline looking for? Well, the airline looking is for unique city pairings. Like I said before, they might be crazy. They might have sounded like they were crazy. They're not that crazy anymore. They're looking to see if the destination, whether the airport, the destination, or both, can offer incentives. Now, what are incentives? And incentives could be that an airport could decide, well, you know what, for the next year, we're not going to charge you any landing fees, and we're not going to charge you for the counters or rent or so forth. We can also say, we're going to put an incentive where we'll actually pay $250,000 in marketing, and we'll do a minimum revenue guarantee. If you don't fill the airplane at 75%, we'll cover the difference. There's all kinds of workable incentives. And the FAA, since March, has actually relaxed some of these FAA restrictions when it came to incentives. So this is a time, there's a destination. If you've never worked with your airport, if you've never worked directly with the airlines, whether it be route development or business development, give it a try. If you don't have the resources, there are companies out there that will do that for you because they have the relationship with the airports, they have the relationship with the airlines, they can put the people together. And even if you didn't think you could be a player, guess what? Right now, you might be able to be a player. So what the airline is looking to leveraging the budgets, whether it be yours, whether it be a partner with another one. I had a discussion last week between two destinations that happen to have a common carrier. The two destinations have never worked together to help the airline. Guess what? This is a beautiful opportunity for two destinations that never worked together, two different states with one common carrier, and the carrier needs help. Well, part of the budget comes out of one, part of the budget comes out of another one. You combine it, and all of a sudden, instead of having $50,000, now you have $100,000. So partnership, look for partner. How can you work together? Because at this stage of the game, the only two markets that behave by tourism by ground are Canada and Mexico. And it's only to limited areas of the country. Everyone else, if you want to resume, is travel internationally. It will have to depend on the airlines. We have a responsibility as destinations, DMOs, CBBs, offices of chambers of commerce, to find ways to work with these people that can bring us the passengers, but they cannot do it alone. They need for us to call them, help them. And as you saw in the presentation that Fernando and I just did, a lot of these tour operators around the world are looking for ways to stay relevant, even though they're not selling a lot. But what are they doing? They're retraining their staff. They're building new inventory. They're using inventory now that they never thought possible. Why? Because they're looking for wide open spaces. They're looking how to incorporate the wide open American road trip into their vacation that they never did before. So they're taking the gateway and expanding it beyond the gateway. But in order to get to the gateway, we still need the airlines. In a new airline world, which started in March, we're going to be looking at an airline world that is probably about between 40 to 60% smaller than it used to be. What if demand is higher? The airlines will scramble. The airlines will scramble to be able to get the equipment. Like Lufthansa, instead of retiring the equipment, they park the equipment. They can say, call that airfield north of Barcelona, say, I need 3 737s. 747, not 777s, or whatever. The business is there if we look at the possibilities that exist, and that's partnering with your airport, your airline, or even your other partners that you could consider competitors. With that, let me pass it on to Fernando. And what are we looking in the future? As we look forward, Fernando?
Well, I think as a recap, it's important to say that the world as we know it is gone. Whatever comes out of this, when it's all over, will be a whole new norm, a whole new procedure. People right now, and I was just reading an article earlier this morning, the #1 search requests when it comes to travel are things like campgrounds, RV parks, which are skyrocketed. They're 150, 180% year over year in searches. People are looking for less crowded, places where they can keep their distance, but at the same time start to get out. We saw here, I'm based in Miami, we started to see a surge of staycations, people wanting to go to small little resorts or villas, places where they can stay away from other people. Then it started to expand to statewide. Now we're seeing a growth. So slowly but surely it's coming in, but keep in mind that right now, less crowded, more open space is what is the norm, is what driving people. Nobody's saying, I want to go to a big city center.
Let's take a look at the next slide, Julie.
Are we not? Yeah, I think we're missing a slide on there. But anyway, as the recovery starts to peak, I mean, there is some hope. We are starting to see restaurants, cities are coming back to life. I know that I can't wait. On September 1st, indoor dining will finally come back to most of the Miami-based restaurants. Until now, you either have to sit outside or it's got to be takeout. So little by little, we're getting there. I think when we find the correct balance between COVID testing and what does that really mean? I mean, clearly, the more people you test, the more cases you're going to find. The less you test, the less cases. But somewhere there's a middle ground. Somewhere there's got to be what makes sense. The CDC's change today maybe doesn't make all the sense in the world, but at least we'll start to see some form of bell curve now where it's going to start to come down and level out. and we'll go back to the more susceptible cases will be what will be tested, and not everybody in general. I've already come across 2 people that I know that tested positive, but completely asymptomatic. How do you fight something like that? Up until we found out that they were tested, I would have gone to their house, or maybe, you know, I don't know, sit on the beach, whatever the case may be. So we have to find that normal curve to go. And as a country, the good news is, and that's our last point on the slide, is for the first time on August 12th, TSA cleared over 800,000 passengers at U.S. airports. That is a record high since March. So again, if you were to graph it, you're going to see that slowly but surely, even with all our fears, people are finally starting to emerge and say, I'm ready to take the chance. As long as the airlines do this, as long as the airports do that, that I will take the chance to take that very much needed trip.
As a matter of fact, by comparison, if you looked at the 800,000 people cleared through TSA on the 12th, if you looked at the same number, same date, 2019, the number TSA cleared 2.4 million. So we still have a long way to go, but
Absolutely.
baby steps. Now, we're entering the low season. September, October, November is a shoulder season. And like Fernando said, I think people are going to either extend their vacation because they need to get out. And I think the Great American Roadshow will be on. And I mean, I was looking at the numbers on RVs and motorhomes. But again, I think we need to look forward. We need to look at the future of what we can expect. But I think we all have, all of us in the travel industry have a role. Our role is to be stay relevant with our clients, whether it be a travel agent, a tour operator, a receptive operator. Stay relevant with the airlines. Find out what the airlines are doing, because that's the pulse. And really, if there's ways to you as a destination, work with your airport. That's how your passengers come in. If your passengers come to you after they go to another airport, it dilutes that number. So instead of getting 100% of the passengers, you may be able to get 60. So there are ways today, in today's environment, to look at opportunities. The airlines are looking for unique city pairings, and they're looking for assistance from destinations. Find out who your route planner is, who your airport route director is. Talk to them, and there's probably ways that you might find things that you never thought possible, only because of the craziness of today's environment, especially on the airways. Thank you, Mary, Julie, Go West, for the opportunity. Thank you, Fernando, for co-hosting. And I guess let's see if we have any questions.
Any questions?
Hi, we did get a few questions. And first, as a point of clarification, just know that this presentation, which includes the slides, will be posted to our website by the end of this week. So if you'd like to review this information or share it with any of your colleagues, you're able to do so that way. Thank you. All right, one question is, it is rumored that German Airline Association is in the talks with the United States to reinstall flight service to North America. Can you please comment on this?
Well, Fernando, you're very familiar with German airspace.
First of all, you said the magic word, rumored.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's talking to everybody. I don't think there's anybody who says we don't want to do it. I think the question is, yes, you know, from the German perspective, we're okay. We'll start to fly to the U.S. under these conditions. The U.S. is responding, well, some of those conditions we can't meet, we can't guarantee. I certainly don't want to open up a can of worms, but a lot of countries are also holding back, waiting to see what happens November 4th. So everybody's talking to everybody. When they started their list of the accepted airlines, in the U.S. jumped in and said, hey, here we are. They said no, but they didn't say no, we never want to see you. The thing is there's a lot of the things that we as an administration will not capitulate to the demands of the German airlines. And so that's what's slowing down some of that. There might be some information I'm not privy to. I'm not that deep into the German government, but I have read a lot of things where talks have gone back and forth, and it usually falls back to the fact that you're not doing what we want you to do, so we're going to hold back. And it's more of a cat and mouse game to see who's gonna win that battle.
Well, you're absolutely right, Fernando, and it is a UK-EU decision. The way that the authorities, and we don't have the number, I don't think that number has been shared of what it would need for us to have a threshold of positive cases. But the bottom line is, it's very, very apparent. In the UK and the EU, they look at us right now as somewhat irresponsible in the way we have behaved and the management of the COVID virus. We are not the example. We're actually what they're using as an example of what not to do. Until we figure out how to behave here in this country by using the things that medically and biologically and scientifically we need to do, the EU, the UK, and the rest of the world, they're still going to look at us as irresponsible, and they're not going to put their people in jeopardy. Canada, right next door, will not open the border until there's a certain amount of certainty that we are doing our part. And I'm sad to say, we are not doing a good job. We see it on our beaches. We see it in places. We see it in bars. We saw it last week with the opening of universities with people having campus parties. So until we can figure out a way to act and be responsible for a certain amount of time, we cannot expect the EU or the UK to allow their passengers to come here. It just makes, it's common sense.
Sorry, and there's also one thing I forgot to mention. If you're familiar with European consumer laws, there is a liability for an operator if they were to sell a package to the US and that passenger gets sick. The European laws are very, very strict, and they're very difficult to dance around. I mean, you may remember many years ago when we were much younger then, but there was somebody who sued a tour operator because they didn't get the sunshine they were promised in their Florida trip. And that changed a lot of how tour operators did business. In today's age, the biggest concern is if an operator sells you a package to anywhere, probably more focused on the US, but basically anywhere, what guarantees are you that you're selling me a package that I won't get sick? It's almost illogical to say, how do you guarantee it? But that's in the back of the mind of a lot of the operators who say, I'm not going to send them somewhere where the news is filled with irresponsibility, with a spike in cases. I mean, take where I am now in Florida. We've slowed down in the number of cases, but not in deaths. So how does someone react to that? You know, so it's really a matter of I think everyone, because no one really knows. And I equate the experts of COVID-19 like the experts that tell us about hurricanes. They don't really know. They guess. They take an educated guess, but I mean, look what's just happening right now with Laura coming through. I mean, it didn't go anywhere near where they first said it was going. Yep. It's just COVID is going to be a continuous excuse for people to hold back, for people to say we're not going to do this, for people to make assumptions. We just don't know.
Thank you, guys. I have a note from one of our attendees from Germany just saying that people traveling to a known unsure area will not get paid sick leave if they get tested positive during quarantine after their return. That's kind of interesting to know what's going on the other side of the world. Thank you for that comment. I have one more question, unless any others come through. Have either of you reviewed social listening reports to measure sentiment around long-haul international travel? And if so, what did that tell you?
Well, I think Alfredo mentioned it already, one thing, and I hate to say it, but particularly in the EU and UK, we're the joke. Of all countries, we're the one who's being singled out as the one who did the least, acted irresponsibly, didn't do enough. Right or wrong, and now that's, again, not going to open up that conversation, but for what we've seen, particularly on a lot of the comments through our social media contacts and all this, is people look at us as, well, you know, we didn't do it right. I'm not going to go there. Everyone else seems to be on the rise. Everyone else seems to be recovering. We're opening up markets, but the U.S. still doesn't have it right. And so that's keeping that fear and that concern of opening the market again. Now, Fredo, I know you had some points on that if you want to add to that.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're not, you know, I know that, and again, not to open any cans of worms, but our leaders keep saying that we're the best and we are the example. Yeah, we're the example of what not to do. And even smaller countries and even states, look what happened, Puerto Rico, for example. Puerto Rico had some cases, they immediately closed the island. Now they close the island. That means that their businesses are closed. They don't have the dry market. They have to either they fly in or they swim in. So they needed to be open. And they said, look, we're not going to open. They did reopen briefly, and they noticed that the number of people getting sick came in to the island. They were not there already. So what did they do? They put their restrictions back on and said, look, we need to be responsible. And if they are going to be long-term sustainable in tourism, they better be damn responsible and in long term, because the news are not good. And I think Fred Dixon said it yesterday from New York said it. If it bleeds, it leads. It leads in the news. People are going to say, yeah, let's look at the bad news. What's going on there? And that is carrying all over the world. And interestingly enough, in the China report, in the research that Fernando and I did, the Chinese, they don't care. They are going to take measures to protect themselves. They will socially distance. They will wear their mask. They will wash their hands. They'll do everything they need to do, but they will be the first visitors to come here. They will be the #1 country coming to the U.S. And I'm hoping that the administration realizes that that's a huge vote of confidence, especially from the way China has been treated. So the fact is that if we are responsible, we behave responsibly, do the things that are so damn basic, we will actually be in the news when we start seeing numbers, not because we're not testing. No, when we actually do the testing, do the instant testing and all the things that go with it, then the news will change and then the borders will open. That's what's going to happen.
Thank you, Alfredo. Fernando, do you have anything else to add on that?
Well, you know, back to the same question. I mean, look, why is the U.S. the only country of all the countries that were affected by pandemic to have people say, constitutionally, you can't make me wear a mask? Think about that. Think about a foreigner who puts on his mask every day because he does not want to get sick and he wants to protect himself, his family, his others. And we in turn around and have people say, you can't make me wear a mask, I'm a free citizen. It's that mentality, right or wrong. I'm not arguing for or against it, but that's the mentality that the Europeans say, well, wait, if they're fighting over their right not to wear a mask, I'm not going to expose myself to it.
But we have and I'll close with this, Fernando, sorry to interrupt. We'll close with this. We still have the U.S. product is still the #1 demand product globally, no matter what. People will put aside the political situation. They'll even say, well, you know what? The minute that I can travel, I will travel. And I will guarantee you that people still have the U.S. The diversity of this country is like nothing anywhere in the world. From coast to coast and the territories, this is where you want to be. And this is where people will want to be. And there's going to be a lot of, why and when, and the patterns will change. But still, we are the product people want. And it's our responsibility to go out there and let them know what we have. And the things that we have done, to make it better, and the things that we're doing right now to even if we can even start getting the drive market. I know from working for Discover Long Island, some of the things that Long Island and New York have done have been completely amazing. What the restaurants did, the information that they were able to give from day one. I remember my boss, Kristen, and Discover Long Island, she kept communicating with her partners. This is what's going on. This is what you need to do. Communicating, preparing, training, letting people know that our product is there. It will be available. The minute it's available, we're ready to give it back. Our travel industry has gone through a lot of stuff in the past. If we go back to what Fernando said, 9/11 and back, we recovered. Now, more than ever, it's a recovery that needs communication, understanding, and responsibility. That's it.
And it's up to us to educate the tourism industry that we are safe and we're open for business and we're taking the measures we need to ensure their safety and their comfort so that they're willing and wanting to add more trips.
Absolutely.
I can't think of a better close for this session than that. And we haven't received any more questions. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Well, thank you, Alfredo and Fernando, for this great discussion. And thank you all for joining us for this session.
Thank you.
Bye.